Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast, the podcast all about the delicate balance between people and business, and quite literally, reconnecting the two. My name is Tracy Rubin, and I've spent nearly my entire professional career in HR. Join me as I share stories, opinions, and words of advice with you each week. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. First of all, I got so many messages and comments about the episode last week with Raina Boston about the parental leaves and all of those interesting points on what exists and what doesn't exist for so many people. So thank you so much for listening and for enjoying that episode. I think it's actually a really important discussion that there are so many people living without leave options, and life happens. And what do you do when you don't have leave options? And actually, for the states also that don't offer leave options, just like a random thought before we jump into this episode, you can enroll in short-term or long-term disability, which potentially covers certain life events, like, for example, pregnancy. If your state does not offer maternity leave, like paid maternity leave benefits, short-term disability and long-term disability in most cases, as far as I'm aware, does extend that benefit. It might not be as generous as like a company paid benefit, but it's something. So I think like some states some state short-term disability benefits give you 60 or 70% of your salary. So there are some options. Look into it if you're, one of those people who are working for that 75% of companies that don't offer paid leave benefits that Raina had mentioned in the episode, and check out what other options you have. Obviously, it does cost you money, but at least you would have some coverage. So that's that on that. Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you that you can connect with me on Instagram, LinkedIn, on my email. You can, send me any ideas or thoughts that you have. I actually did receive a podcast, like the Google form that I have, I should say, the Google form, anonymous submission form. That form actually is really helpful if you want to share something and maybe you just want to keep it anonymous. Totally possible. So I bring up the anonymous submission form for a reason, and it's because I want to spend this week talking a little bit about some questions that you all have sent to me either through the submission form, through Instagram, LinkedIn, and different questions that are really related to careers, career pathing, and even how I decided on some of the steps that I took in my career. So let's get into it. I'm going to pull up the form now. And actually, if you are listening to this, wherever you're listening to this, I am really trying to actively make every episode a video episode. So this is a video episode. If you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, you can actually watch me talk to you. So the first question that I have here is, why did you decide to get an MPA degree over an MHRM, which is a master's in HR management? I think I'm getting that right. So when I was applying or really deciding to go for my master's, I was still working at Target. So I think it must have been 2015 that I started doing the research into getting my master's. And I'm like a forever student. I love learning. I love all of the things that go along with school, like reading and writing essays. Like I loved all of that. I loved being a student. And maybe it's because I was good at it. Frankly, I think if you're not so good at school, then you don't really enjoy it much. But I was super lucky in that way to really appreciate and enjoy school. And I don't know if anyone can relate to that at all, or if that's like a totally cringy thing to say, but that is my truth. I was good at school and I really liked it. And maybe I was good at it because I liked it. I don't know. I was that girl that looked forward to school literally every single day. Even when I was getting bullied, I still liked school. So anyway, why did I decide to get an MPA? I was researching in 2015. I knew I wanted to get my master's. And I think a big part of my decision was not having to take a test to get into my master's, because I was like, I work a lot of hours. I don't want to be totally burnt out studying for, the GMAT or the GRE to get into or place into a program. And really, the decision for me was between an MBA and an MPA. I never even considered the MHRM because at that point I had already had some HR experience, and I don't know, honestly, it didn't even cross my mind. Maybe I didn't even know about it. I don't know. I can't fully remember, but I knew that I wanted to have the option if I ever wanted to change my career. I wanted to have the option of being like a little bit more generalized. And I don't regret that decision. I think for me, having been in the business sector and like the private sector of business, meaning, really like profitable businesses, um or for profit businesses, I wanted to branch out a bit in the nonprofit side of business and in terms of my learning. And I think this also came from um my winning an election to be on the board of education in my town that I had grown up in and I lived in. And I had been on the board of education actually for a number of years. I was on the board of ed starting 2016. Yeah. So 5 years. I started my master's January 2017. I was accepted in the fall of 2016 when I had applied like just a few months before. And I won the election for Board of Ed in 2016. Okay. So I just like, I do this to myself. I'm like, let me do it all at once. Let's do it. So 2016, I work at Target. I'm in HR now for about almost 2 years. I decide to enroll in a master's program. I also decide to run for Board of Education rep, member, whatever you want to say. And I won the election and I got accepted to the master's program. So I share this timeline because actually I think it's super important in how it affected my decision. So um, I was really passionate about giving back to my community, and I loved I loved the school district that I had the privilege of going to. And I've shared before, I come from very humble beginnings, but school was like always that place. And so anyway, doing the board of ed like was my way of giving back. And so I think part of my decision in doing an MPA was like exploring this possibility of going into a governmental organization, nonprofit, and potentially going outside of and leaving retail at some point, and just having like a little bit more of expansive knowledge. On the flip side of things, as I was doing research, I vividly remember doing this research in Barnes and Noble one day on a beautiful, beautiful spring or summer day. And my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, I said to him, I was like, I really want to go to a prestigious program, like regardless of what the degree is, I want to go somewhere, notable, just like my undergrad. And I was looking at MBA programs and MPA programs, and Rutgers had one of the best. I think it was like number 13 for MPA. And I knew that I also had to do it online. So this was a major factor too, because I worked so many hours at Target. I needed to have the flexibility to go to school when I wanted to go to school and when I could. So instead of going to like night classes, which I knew I wouldn't be able to commit to, or going to full time school, which I wouldn't be able to afford, I had to do something part time and online. So that narrowed down the list quite a bit. And Rutgers, in terms of online and in general, Masters of Public Administration programs, they had the number 13 school in terms of national rankings. I did look at, super expensive schools with like major notoriety, but I didn't like their class offerings, and they didn't really have such great standing in the program outside of like just the actual school. Like, for example, Columbia, Duke, and NYU were some of the schools that I was qualified to like apply for. I didn't end up applying, but I was qualified to apply. Coming back to this thought on like not wanting to test, this was like another big thing for me, that I really worked hard in college, and I had a lot of success and achievement, and I wanted that to be worth something. So I didn't want to just like, throw that away. And I also didn't want to do any more testing because I just felt like I would burn out. So I was like, let me just find a program that will accept my GPA as the entrance requirements. And so I found a couple programs, and then narrowing it down further again based on wanting to find a program, A, that I could afford, B, that was flexible for my lifestyle, and then C, that was, nationally ranked. That's how I ended up finding the Rutgers and deciding on the Rutgers MPA program. To this point on the financials, I had a super, super, super major student loan debt, which I thankfully and happily paid off in 2021 before I got engaged, which was it was like back to back excitements, like, woo, I paid off my student loan debt, which was like almost six figures, to then, getting engaged. Like, it was just like one amazing thing after another. And I worked my what off to pay off those loans. And I feel for everyone in the position of paying them off. All I can say is, there are some tricks of the trade, and maybe one day I can share what I did to get ahead of my loans, but it is hard work, and you just have to put your head down and work at it. And I didn't give up on life. I still was able to travel and do a couple things, but I literally put basically like every cent into my loans. Anyway, I knew that I did not want to take out additional loans, that I wanted to be able to pay off my loans and pay for this program simultaneously, because I absolutely refused to put myself into further debt, even if it was like the good debt over school. So I also needed to really think about a program that wasn't going to run me into the ground. And by the way, the Rutgers program, still super expensive. Like, no one tells you how expensive these master programs are. They are so expensive. Fortunately, I had a little bit of tuition reimbursement from Target, so that really helped me to kick off my education. And I highly recommend that anyone, thinking about pursuing their education, really think through the offerings at your company. So beyond that, that was really how I decided on the MPA program. MBA, I hated the courses. Accounting, finance, oh, I could not care less for those classes, and I didn't want to take those classes. I'm sorry. It was just like so unappealing to me. I'm like, I don't care if an MBA on paper is like better for business. I don't want it. So, I fortunately, the MPA program did have HR courses, but what I found in taking those courses is that I could have taught them because I already had that HR experience. So this is where I feel really good about the education that I did choose to get. The MPA was really helpful for me in giving me like a bit of a broader stroke understanding of the way that business, profit, for profit and nonprofit work, and works. So that was great. And I think I would feel similarly if I had gone for an MHRM. Having had HR experience, I think I probably would have felt like I was spending a lot of money on information that I had already received. So I think if I were a little bit more entry level, or if I was in a different environment, because in Target, you're getting every single experience at once. So I feel like, in a way, like 2 years in HR is not so entry level anymore, but maybe in a different environment where it's a little bit slower paced, or maybe it's a different industry, you're not necessarily getting that exposure as quickly. So maybe it would have been more helpful to me in that moment. Super long winded answer for why I chose an MPA, and I shared so many personal anecdotes there. But I really do hope that that helps. So, one of the questions that I received was around how I got, established in my career, and how I kind of climbed the ladder as quickly as I did. And unfortunately, this was the question that I was answering that I now am re recording. So, I hope that I can captivate you the same way that I think that I would have in that initial recording where my video camera had turned off. But anyway, so if you are new to this, HR Tracy bringing the human back to human resources podcast network, then I will tell you, and maybe we're not even connected on LinkedIn either, I will tell you that I started my HR career at Target after college, and I was there for almost 4 years. It was like an HR generalist role, and there you get so much exposure so quickly. And I was then, after 4 years, I then decided to go to SMCP, which is a global luxury fashion retailer. And I went for a promotional opportunity to HR business partner for North America. And the volume and headcount were very similar, because one Target store in New Jersey could be the same volume as an entire company. It's like crazy what Target does. And then I was promoted to HR manager. about a year later. And then a couple of years after that, I was promoted to director of HR for North America. So when I was with SMCP, I was there almost 5 years, and I had those three roles while I was there. And, if you are connected with me, if you've been listening to the podcasts, you know that I come from very humble beginnings. And I think it's, easy to assume that someone has had, a certain kind of upbringing, but I can tell you that I grew up really fast. Anyway, it's not my story to tell, as they say. One of the things that I think has taken me to these, different levels in my career has really been two things. One, the relationships in my life and the relationships that I've always prioritized, because to me, relationships are everything. Like, if you can connect with someone genuinely and authentically, you're going to build them up and they're going to build you up. And that was everything to me, and it still is. Like, if I can make someone feel good at work genuinely, and like make them feel like they're doing something good with their time and they can persevere and get through things that are challenging, like that's an amazing thing. And I just have always tried to be that person in the workplace who truly and authentically is fun and builds people up. And the second thing is that I've really never stopped working. If I were to bring my sister into this podcast and ask her, if I'm any different today than I was when I was 12 years old, I think she would say no. And I have always been like the person that can never have enough jobs, can never have enough going on, is always working and working and working and working. And I wouldn't change anything about how I am or the way that I live my life. So in school, it's like when I put in the hard work, whether it was school or athletics or band, whatever it was that I set my mind to, that hard work no one could take away. Like, that was not anything that anyone could touch. It was mine. And so for me in my career, I've really been the same way, like this like hyper driven, like achievement focused person who just like, I set my sights to something or on something and I go for it. And I've really always been that way. And in my career, I've definitely brought people with me and people have brought me with them. And that's where the relationships come in. But you can't just thrive on relationships. Like, you have to put in the work. And so I just worked my tail off, like in Target, working 70 hours a week sometimes. That was a huge life lesson, that one, like, I could do that work and I didn't burn out very fast at all, which is, I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I just loved having a purpose, having to go into work and have 300, 250, 300 employees like looking for and depending on me for guidance. That gave me so much fulfillment and so much purpose that I just worked harder and harder and harder. And that perseverance to really like rise above some challenges, because you're always going to have challenges while you're working hard, and while you have success, there are always going to be those ups and downs. But I really felt like, the sky was the limit. And if I imagined something, that I would get it, as long as I put in that work. So for me, like, I knew I always wanted to be a director, and I wanted to be a director under 30, and I did it. And so once I got there, I was like, wow, so now what's next? And so for me, like, I'll put it out there, I really want to be like a head of people, a chief people officer, whatever that title is. That is something I set my mind to and I think about every day. Some people, my family probably included, think that I'm like totally insane and like I need to sometimes know how to just relax and sit back. But I just see every day as one more step toward my goals. And of course, I have goals and dreams outside of work too. And it's why I got married. And, all of those things come with life and feeling fulfilled and successful in all different ways and in different areas of our lives. But in terms of my career, that question around like how I got to where I am and what it took, I did not rest. And I still don't rest. Like, every single day I try to um, put in the work to make myself a better leader, a better HR professional, a better person. And it really is like, it's just like a relationship. You have to work at it every single day. And yes, it is exhausting. There are days where I'm like, maybe I should just go into something else. But I'm so glad that I just continued to work at it. And I've definitely been met with some serious like challenges in my career too. I've made mistakes, I've failed, I've had people not want to see me succeed and deliberately try to make me fail. But all I can say to those people is challenge accepted, because like no one's been able to to make me fail. Like if I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna do it myself, you know. So that is a little window into how I've gotten to where I am. And I never want to speak as though I don't understand that there are people out there that don't necessarily have like the same access, because obviously there are listeners across the globe. I'm fully and acutely aware that there are people and countries that and just communities in general that don't have the same access, and that being born in this country gives me access to things that other people in other countries don't necessarily have, and that does not fall blindly on me. I'm fully aware of that, and I'm super grateful for the access and the privileges that I do have. When I think about like my life and my career and all of the adversity that I've experienced and the speed at which I grew up, I mean, it's super easy to let those moments of adversity weigh you down and make it like the world is just way too heavy to take on, and that maybe it's okay for you to just exist. But there is a way to remind yourself that you can reach your goals and your dreams, and that it whatever success means to you, it's achievable. You can reach it. For some people, success is getting married and having a family, and success for other people is being a CEO. Success for some people is being able to afford their rent month to month. I mean, that is proof in the pudding that success means something different to everyone. And that's why I really think if you put your mind to something, you can achieve it. It doesn't mean that you will, but you can. And it might take a long time, but you will get there if you keep putting in the work and you keep persisting, and you let people help you, and you also help others. It is okay to get help from people. I definitely have learned that over time. I didn't always want people to help me because I wanted to be able to prove that I could do it. But sometimes you just end up wasting time. Sometimes it's really nice to let people help you. So anyway, that's my existential crisis moment for the day. I hope that helps and answers your question. So with that, I'll move on to the next one. There was another submission here in the anonymous submission form, and I'm going to remove specific information that could be identifying. Okay. Hi, Tracy. I've worked for an employer in a particular location in an HR assistant role for the past more than 5 years. I'm not going to say the exact number. I'm also in college obtaining a degree in HR. I don't believe my employer is following the rules of salary correctly. I was given the opportunity to become salary from hourly about 4 years ago. They explained to me the benefits of being salary, being able to leave for an appointment, come in late, all the perks, right, of being not on the clock, and that I don't have to make the time up. I thought this was great, as did my family when I had the discussion with them. My first mistake was not obtaining this change in writing. Once I turned salary, my bosses expected me to work longer hours or come in early. This expectation was asked at my review, and I was told there was no expectation or requirement becoming salary. Again, my first mistake was not getting any of this in writing. Anyways, since then, I've had to leave early or come in late occasionally due to appointments, but my employer requires me to make up the hours. So if I left at 4 instead of 5, my leader would ask me to make up this hour. I've explained to my leader that this requirement doesn't match the benefits of being salary, and every time she argues that if I don't work a full 40-hour work week, that I have to make it up, and that is what salary means. Can you help shed some light on this, or help me to approach my leader about this again? I've tried to have professional conversations about this multiple times. I've printed out the salary law, and I've gotten nowhere. It's gotten to the point that I'm now back in school obtaining other certifications to hopefully make a move out of here. But for the time being, I'd like to help approach her. I'd like to be able to approach her about this, and maybe it'll change my mind on leaving. I'm glad I read that because there's a lot to take in there. First things first, salary, it's true. You can really work kind of whenever, but the caveat there is that although your salary, the expectations of work hours may be different. So in handbooks, for example, you might see, if you're salaried or hourly, you might see this, where, the expectation for a full-time salaried employee is to work 40 hours a week. It's not to say that a leader should be like, oh, you worked 39 hours, you need to come in and make up that hour. That's really not, I don't get that. That's not something I've really ever seen, because the whole point in being salary is that you're getting paid for 40 hours regardless. And like, you might work 45 and you might work 39, you might work 70. So there isn't so much a law on being able to come and go and not needing to work 40 hours a week, because the expectation when you're being paid a salary is that you're working 40 hours a week, assuming that that is the agreement between you and your employer. I wanted to clarify that, and I already recorded this, so I'm adding one additional recording here, that salary exempt does not really have anything to do with the hours worked. But if you're salaried non-exempt and you're eligible for overtime, then yes, there could be some specifics around worked hours where you are still required to work the specific number of hours while you're earning a salary, and you have some different policies attributed because you are considered salary non-exempt. It's not so common, but the exemption status it's an FLSA issue and situation, which is why most salaried individuals are salary exempt, because they're typically managers, and there are a lot of very specific guidelines and parameters that determine whether someone is salary exempt or not. But if you are salary non-exempt, again, meaning you are eligible for overtime, then yes, your hourly experience and whether you can come and go, or even whether or not you have to clock in and out, can be impacted in this situation. So I just wanted to make that one clarification. So there are some caveats. So with this question, I think it's less of a salary law issue and more of a workplace flexibility issue. Because in theory, if you're earning a salary, like, yes, you can come and go as you please, but your employer may require you to work 40 hours and expect that you make up that time if you're not at 40 hours. I would go back to your handbook and look to see if there's specific policies on this. Because if there are specific policies on this, then you want to know that. But this doesn't strike me as a salary issue. And then the other thing with this is that, I think you can approach this by asking the question so that you can understand better what the expectation is. And I feel like having that open conversation, just approaching it from, a seek to understand perspective, could be really good. And then, the other thing in hopefully making a move out of this role, I challenge you to really understand, like, are you unhappy in this organization because you don't have a whole lot of autonomy and empowerment? Or is it because you feel that they are breaking the laws? Because from what I see in this submission, there aren't any noticeable laws being violated. But again, I don't have all the information. I'm not a legal entity in any way, and the state that you are in might have very specific laws. So, take this with a grain of salt, but really think about that a little bit more critically. Like, are you upset because you just want to have a little bit of autonomy and, like, oh my gosh, it's literally an hour, what is the big deal? Because I agree with you, that would annoy me too. But if you are looking to leave because you feel they're breaking the law, and they potentially are not, then you might save yourself from having to go through that whole process of finding another job, because you might have a misunderstanding of the situation. So that's my 2 cents. I could have a totally different perception of what's actually going on. So if I didn't get that right, like if there are other things that were not shared in this submission that I need to understand in order to help give you advice, then I'd be happy to read through that and better understand those other nuances. But that is my initial reaction. I hope it all works out. Let me know. For anyone whose questions I've answered in this episode, if I missed the answer you were looking for, or I missed a part of the question, please reach out to me. I don't read every single one because some of them are just like super short and thematic, whereas this one was really specific. So yes, use the submission form. You also, on anchor.fm/hrtracy, you can submit voice messages. So like a little call-in moment. So if you want to do that too, you have the option. I would love to hear from you. I would love to answer more of your questions. And with that, I thank you so much for being here for another week. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching this. And I hope to see you next week. As a matter of fact, I know I will see you next week. Thank you so much. See you.